Welcome to our Women in Field Service webinar. Thank you to Kristen and Debbie for being here and sharing your experiences and perspectives. So I'm Liza Solly. I'm the VP of Customer and Servicer Success here at Service Power. I came to field service management about 3 years ago now, and I have many years of experience in customer success, but was actually new to field service. My background has been in software as a service in various industries: energy management, website design and development, e-learning, e-commerce. And then I got pulled into the field service management space, and it's been great so far. All of my experience has a common thread of that CS and account management. And now I'm focused on both the enterprise customer side of Service Power as well as supporting our servicers. So I'm very excited to talk more today about what we all share in the industry here. Kristen, let's start with you. Would you mind just doing a quick introduction of yourself?
Hi, I'm Kristen Burrell. I'm VP of Strategy and Operations at Allstate Protection Plans, which is also known as SquareTrade. And I lead service strategy and supply chain for a suite of in-home categories representing 100 millions of NWP. And that includes categories such as major appliances, televisions, lawn and garden items. And we work with a large network of contracted service providers to provide in-home repairs for our customers who have issues with their covered items. Prior to joining APP, I spent a long time in management consulting, and prior to that, I had an engineering background. And so really combining the engineering and the problem solving with the business, it was very logical for me to move into this operations space, which has a big focus on the field service management piece as well. And so I'm excited to come here and speak to everyone today.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. And Debbie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Debbie Clintworth. I currently own D3S Service. Our main hub is out of Houston, but we cover all over Texas and Oklahoma City. We also own Sloan Appliance, which is in Columbia, South Carolina, also in Charleston, Aiken, and Augusta, and we hope to be expanding that one as well. And we're a service company, so we work with all the major manufacturers within both companies.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. All right, so thank you both for being here. We're going to cover some big and maybe obvious topics that surround women in our workforce, field service management. So I wanted to start with the most central one, which is hiring. So really, when I think about hiring, I think of lack of women in the workforce. Why aren't there more women in field service management? So I just returned from the PSA Servicer Conference last week in Virginia. And as I expected, the women at the event were heavily outnumbered. So thinking about that and your experience and your route to coming to field service management, which hearing from all of us obviously was very different for each of us, how do you think we could improve the number of women in field service management and broadly, either on the service side or maybe the management side? What are some things that come to mind as areas where you think we could get those numbers up as far as increasing women in the workforce?
I think the best way to get it out there is to really introduce us as an industry. The trades need to be introduced to women specifically because honestly, they can make a lot more money than a normal office job. And I think a lot of women are very capable of doing it. I think they're maybe afraid to do it, just as my mothers were geared toward teachers and nurses versus the doctor, the lawyer, or something like that. So time has to change a little bit, and we have to be the educators to get it out there so that everyone can see what kind of opportunities are there for each woman. It's not just a male-dominant industry anymore for plumbers, electricians, all of that. Women just haven't had the opportunity, or they haven't been introduced into that industry like the men have been in the past.
Yeah, exposure, right? And maybe
Yes.
It really is about that. I think of even the messaging and the imagery and the branding that is often done in the trade. And that tends to be more male dominated, which of course is a reflection of the current makeup of our workforce. However, what opportunities are there to change the recruiting strategy? So thinking about how we get that out there, I think it's all about education and exposing people to the opportunity that there are for women in this space. Kristen, anything to add from your perspective as you think about improving just exposure and more women from a hiring perspective?
Yeah, I think that absolutely that is one of the big problems that we face is when women are thinking about what opportunities and avenues they have to build a career in, and they see areas where there aren't a lot of other women, that can be daunting or off-putting. And I think as someone who's come from multiple areas of male dominated industries, engineering, management consulting, one of the things that actually might be an interesting perspective is when I was in consulting, I was actually one of only, I think, 2 women in the office or something like that. And I would get sent on every recruiting trip that we had to show that there were women who were working in this industry. And I thought it was funny at the time, but now I actually appreciate it as like, you need to show that this is an opportunity for everyone so that we get more people who are even interested or even think that they could join and do this type of work. And so maybe some similar strategy like that could work where we really showcase the women who are working in field service management or in the field itself and bring that to the places where we're doing recruiting or we're doing training.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And thinking about, again, that branding and messaging that gets put out there. And the recruiting story is funny because there are a few examples of this, but to the extent that we're able to expose them and shed light on it, I think there's a major opportunity here. One of the things we had talked about leading up to the webinar here, and Chris, I'm going to share this, but I think it was you that had this idea too, was about separating a woman's perspective on being a technician or being in the field service space from the businesses. And at the end of the day, and Debbie, I am interested if you agree with this as a business owner, you just want to have the most well-equipped technicians, whatever demographic they might come from. From a business's perspective, you're just trying to fill out your workforce with the most talent that you possibly can. And so the converse side of that is, are women getting the impression themselves as people who are looking at these opportunities? And to the original point, Debbie, is there enough insight and marketing out there to talk about the benefits of this space, the career that can be made, the dollars that are available, the stable income that can be out there? So Debbie, you must feel like at this point, you're rounding out your technician base with those that are most talented, right?
We sure do try. I know that a lot of women are more into getting a degree or an associate's, and the men are more on the job training and they'll take whatever experience they can get. And I think there has not been in the past enough training facilities for the women to get the training. There's a lot of schools out there, but they're more for HVAC. But I know that plumbing, electrical does have some schools that they go to so you can get some sort of a certification, but appliance repair does not have any of that. But we're actually working with a number of trade schools that are actually coming up with these programs. So yes, we are trying to hire within those schools, but I don't see a lot of women coming through those schools right now. We need to get the word out that there are this availability because women would rather get their education and then go try to get the job. That I've seen, the people that have applied, they want the education first. The men just want the job and they'll see what they can do. It's very different mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to come back to a couple of the points that you just raised. One last thing on hiring that I have a thought about is that when I start posing questions around the fact that there are few women in the workforce, it seems like there's some negative connotation to that, and that perhaps there's sort of this void that we need to fill. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits, some of the things that may actually be unique benefits to having women in roles like service or technicians, and what some of those might be. Kristen, thinking about some of the advantages to having a female workforce, can you think of some attributes or some ways in which actually women could really be beneficial to the space and maybe bring unique value?
Absolutely. And especially the types of work that we do within APP, we do a lot of triage and troubleshooting over the phone so we can be really efficient with time in the actual field. And one of the things that's really important to succeed in that is just really good soft skills and empathy, because the customer is frustrated. Their item that they rely on every day is not working and they're frustrated about it. You may be asking them to do a little bit of work. Go look behind this, give me the number from the service sticker, pull this out. You may be asking them to do a few things. And so it really requires a bit of soft skills, a bit of a sales pitch to get the customer to be willing to do that and explain to them that at the end of the day, this is the best use of their time because we're going to facilitate a quicker, more accurate repair as on the basis of this information that they're providing us. And that's not to say men can't do this as well, but I think certainly if you look at on the phone support environment, women really do excel there as well, because it's easy for them to learn that empathy, that soft skill that allows them to connect with the customer and get that rapport in order to get the information we need to provide that successful repair.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even the attention to detail, and Debbie, something I think you had raised initially was also proactiveness. This idea that the female perspective may also be lending itself to things like higher first time completes, and that perhaps some of the traits that tend to be more likely associated with females are actually really beneficial when you think about the other side of the house as well, in a technician coming into someone's home and really focusing on asking the right questions, not just on the phone like Kristen articulated, but also while on site with a customer. Let's move on, because I think, Debbie, you set the stage very nicely for training. And I think that very clearly training and hiring go hand in hand. And when I think about training, I think there's a few different dimensions here that have already been mentioned. There's initial training, that education and ramp up, as you described, Debbie, and there's also continuous improvement. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that you're alluding to, I think, Debbie, which is the Dyer Appliance Academy. This is one of the things that you shared with me, where somebody evolved a family business of training technicians and really filling a void. And I was struck when I did a little more homework into the academy, how accessible the information is. So meaning that they have everything from a 2-week program to weekend training options. And when you think about trying to get people in general, and females as a part of that, into the workforce, to have different options available is huge. I also noticed that in that particular website, there were things like association connections, job board, and resources all bundled up into that. So Debbie, tell me a little bit more about these academies and some of the educational opportunities you are referring to. How widespread are they? Are they geographically clustered in certain areas? Have they been evolving over the last 5 to 10 years that you've seen?
Absolutely. We're getting more and more. We're also working with some junior colleges to start trade programs and have every trade. The vocational programs are starting to come back into these junior colleges, not just for a 2 or a 4-year degree to go on to a university. And so we're working as an industry. All of the industries are really working to improve the trades there. Along with Dyer, there's several new appliance repair schools coming up. I don't know all of the names, and I don't have a personal relationship with all of them, but I know I think there's one in Atlanta. There's one, it's called Fred's. It's been around forever. Then there's Dyer. I know of those 3 very large ones, but there's also a number of junior colleges. So if somebody just does a little bit of research within their state, I can almost bet you that they're opening up one in the next year or 2, because I know they're trying to get that across the country. And those give you a start.
I'm so glad to hear the comment you made about vocational training coming back into the fold, because one of the things I had read actually was that during COVID, which affected the workforce in many different ways, as we know, obviously we saw a huge retirement cycle that affected the age of folks in this field in general. And there's been a challenge to refill some of those gaps where this boom of people, or the bust of people leaving the industry, came into effect after COVID. And I think part of that too, from my understanding of it, is that training programs, or like programs to vocational education, were often cut from curriculum as well. And I think those are things that probably maybe were more successful in person. I think there are lots of different reasons, funding perspectives. And so to hear that there's a resurgence of vocational trade training is huge. And I think that's absolutely going to open the door for a new wave of younger people, which solves for gaps in our overall industry as far as the workforce size and compilation, and also obviously bringing opportunities to women as well.
Well, and I also think that after COVID, we all got very good at a Zoom call so that you don't have to be there to do a lot of the studying. They would like you to do hands-on, but you can do a lot of the book work online. I know Master Samurai Academy is another one. That's an online program, 100%. It will teach you electricity, how to read the schematics in order to fix the appliance. So it gives you a very good foundation to get more out of your in-person training. They're really working on lots of different ways to get you the furthest. And the average of trade, it doesn't matter whether it's HVAC, plumbing, or appliance repair, they're making 47,000 plus the first year, which is quite a bit of money. It's a lot more than just $15 an hour in an office.
Yeah.
So it does give men and women a start, and they can start making that within 2 to 3 months if they pick it up quickly. At least within the first year, you will be fully trained. You're not going to have 2 or 3 years worth of schooling that you have to do, and you don't have to really do an apprentice. It's at your own pace, but if you can pick it up very quickly and you're very mechanical, you will be making quite a bit of money right away.
That's great. Kristen, as you think about training as it relates to your industry and maybe Allstate Protection Plan or SquareTrade, have there been any unique opportunities for women in mentorship positions or mentee? Has your organization done anything to try to expand upon that specifically as far as training or nurturing females?
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally mentor many women across the organization, especially women who are growing into leadership roles. And I have many women on my team who work in kind of an indirect but field service management space, whether that's managing diagnosis or triage, parts ordering, or our network of independents and the repairs that they manage. And one of the things that we realize and try to get the word out about is that you don't really have to have a lot of prior experience to learn this part of the business. You know, we have women who have come from the call center environment. They're already really, really skilled in the soft skills and working with customers and the customer service side. Of course, they need to learn a little bit on the technical side. They need to learn how service companies operate, how we diagnose, how we order parts, all those things they need to learn. And then similarly, we have folks who have come from more of the technician background or technical background that maybe need to get some of that customer service experience. But whatever the gaps are or whatever the strengths are of those folks, we can train the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And we've done that very successfully with men and women. But I know we're talking about women today. And so I can point to many examples on my team of women who have come from completely different backgrounds and have been able to excel and really learn field service management and work in it for many years now.
Yeah. And I think so much of it is back to the very top of our discussion here, breaking down any of the obstacles or the fear or the barriers. And so successful mentors do that no matter what, and you're creating opportunity. And I think part of the onus on all of us being from different facets of field service management is continuing to advocate for exposure just to where the opportunities are. I'm going to go ahead and move us along to talk a little bit about our third topic, which is safety. So safety, I think, is applicable to everybody in the workforce, obviously, but there is something unique to women in field service management. And I think more specifically, what comes to mind when I think a little bit about this is on the service side, a female technician that may be going into someone's house alone on a daily basis, for example, or also thinking about some of the other safety components that may come to mind, like protective equipment. Do things properly fit a female versus a male if traditionally that role has been fulfilled by a man? Are they ensuring that workplace safety, regardless of the industry, accommodates for both males and females? So as you both think about this, what are some ways that the challenges are unique for women as it relates to safety in the industry?
I think that right now is probably the prime time for women to join. Several years ago, we didn't have GPS to track where you were. We had no idea, so we wouldn't know at what house you were at. Now we have that. We have cameras. We can get on a visual support call now with a woman. So basically, they can be tracked all the way through from getting out of their van at the customer's home, all the way through the whole repair and then back in the van and on their way. And they're never alone, if that's the way that company is going to be with them. So I feel like it's the safest time to ever do that. I also feel like any tools or anything that you would need are definitely for women as well, whether it be the size of the tool for their hands compared to a man, they're making them. Everyone is really thoughtful out there about making sure that each person has what they need. You will have to be able to lift at least 50 pounds for this job, but you work anywhere anymore and you're going to have to lift 50 pounds. So that would probably
that's my 5-year-old, slinging him around all day.
One suitcase when you're traveling.
Yes. Yeah. So that is it. But I think safety with all of the technology is right there where women should feel comfortable. I also think that women also have a step up with a lot of different religions now that don't really want a man in the home without the husband being there. And if a woman comes in, then the man doesn't have to take off from work and come home and lose that income of his own job, where he feels a little bit more comfortable with the woman coming in and dealing with an appliance that a woman uses on a regular basis for the stay-at-home moms. So I think it's a very good time for the women to start doing in-home appliance repair at least.
Yeah, all great points. And actually, as you were talking too, I was thinking of a few repairs I've had to have done at my own house where actually having a female, assuming they maybe are smaller stature than a male, would be hugely advantageous. So I have a very unique crawl space for an air conditioner component. And it's very hard for someone to get in there. Anyone on the smaller side may be really adept to getting in there. I also think about a technician that I just had out servicing my range, this big gas range. And he was sort of complaining about these areas of needing to get his hand in there to fix something. There are inherent benefits should a female be smaller than a male that might actually be beneficial too. And I love your point about safety as it relates to technology, Debbie, because I think that's really, really pertinent and true in so many aspects of our lives. But the idea that a female in the workforce could have the GPS or the camera tracking, and that we're just expanding the ways in which we bring technology into the service industry, things like using AI and just bolstering the experience of the tech in the home to be able to get aids and get help during that appointment, it just goes hand in hand with that. So really great points. Kristen, anything that you would add with regards to the comfort component or actually some of the advantages to females from a safety perspective?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to how do we leverage technology and keep up within field service management. I was in an Uber the other day and I got a notification on my phone that said there's going to be recording in the cabin. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. If I was a female Uber driver, I would feel a lot more comfortable knowing that there was a record of what was happening in my car in case something went wrong. And so I think we can, like Debbie said, utilize the same thing in field service management with live calls or recording or video calls with people. I think there are a lot of ways that we could leverage that to make women feel a lot more secure on the job and in their work and in other people's homes. So I just think that's a great idea to keep exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, really relatable for anybody in the field as we continue to add technology into our workforce. So one of the last things I want to cover is work-life balance. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, but one of the things that we've acknowledged in a stat that I had read some time ago is that women in the workforce actually faced steeper job losses and slower recovery than men as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously, there is a major hiring gap for field service management in general. There's the safety considerations we've talked about. And I also think there's this unique dimension of work-life balance. And obviously, everybody is concerned about striking that balance. But I do think there's some unique considerations for women. One of the things that we've talked about are those soft skills, or maybe the fact that women tend to be more natural caregivers. So I'm wondering if some of that maternal instinct also could have an effect on women that are juggling unique circumstances like family or maybe a pregnancy that may cause some friction to their work situation. I don't know if either of you have an example of how this has impacted you personally, or maybe Debbie from your workforce, if you've had to deal with any circumstances like this that could have a pro or a con relative to a female that may be looking to figure out how to balance unique circumstances from a work-life perspective.
Well, I do have a friend of mine. She owns an appliance repair company with her husband, and she actually started her company because she had 6 children. It's not like she could just get away from them. She needed to find a way to make some money. And so she was fixing the appliances and selling them. And then it blossomed into a very lucrative business that her and her husband are now running. Her kids are starting to be grown, and she has brought them into the industry as well. And so now they work, and her company has actually grown due to that. So she started just by tinkering around. She was mechanically inclined, and she basically taught herself the business way before any of these schools ever came to fruition. So it's very good to see that. She's a definite success story for that.
Yeah, absolutely. In multiple dimensions. I mean, owning one's own business, being self-taught, now bringing her younger generation into the business, which we see all the time. Field service management on the service side, multi-generation family-owned businesses are really, really common. And it's pretty unique. I mean, as I shared with my background, I come from a lot of different industries. And I think that this field service management space is really the only one that I've been involved with professionally where I've seen so much focus on maintaining the generational pass down of the business, the generational components of the business. And it really is unique. And perhaps it's something that is really beneficial too, to creating that knowledge, passing down the knowledge, and also creating the career opportunity.
Absolutely. And it did give her the work-life balance so that she could take care of her kids as well as support the family and contribute there. And I think it doesn't matter whether you own the business or you work for someone. I know as a business owner myself, I would hire a woman all day long if they would do a couple of jobs for me a day and they could work part-time. If that's what they were looking for, it doesn't matter whether you were going to be in my office or in the field. I do it now. I would do it again and again and again for really good people or somebody that wanted to learn. I would definitely help them also because we're in somebody's home. We have to deal with their schedule. We can work around our schedule to help our customers. So if you want to come in really early, get your kids to school, then come back to work, you can do that. It just depends on your customers. If they want service at 7:00 in the morning and you can run a call and then come back and take your kids to school or make sure they get off and then go back to work again, you can do that in this industry because you're out in the field. It's just like any other industry where you're not actually stuck in an office. You have a little bit of free time. I mean, I allow my technicians to drive and go have lunch with their son or daughter at school and then get back on the road. They just have to let me know what's going on. So yeah. I think it gives them a little freedom for that work-life balance so that they enjoy what they're doing a little more. If you're happy at home, I think you're happy at work.
Yeah, and Debbie, I think you're hitting on maybe another quality that makes a female manager and business owner very welcoming. And I think that a lot of these are overgeneralizations, but I think just even that idea of you as the business owner creating these expectations and clear lines of communication in a way that maybe isn't always true. And I think a couple of things come to mind. And Kristen, your story about being pulled into your recruiting earlier makes me think that there is an opportunity to actually have this whole story be very positive for women too. There could be a really unique benefit to you, Kristen, being exposed to everybody through the recruiting process or being someone who is the face of your firm in that capacity. That could also create a lot of exposure for whomever that person is to other people within the business or your clients. And so perhaps the fact that women are currently outnumbered in our industry, there may be a positive spin to that too, relative additional opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for a fact that many women ended up joining my firm because I was there at the recruiting event and they felt like, oh, that's great. There are women who work here. This will be a good place for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you think about too, just Kristen, you manage a very large team and probably a very diverse team, but setting expectations and to Debbie's example there, having women in management roles where you are being very clear, being very calm, being very open about what the expectations are. I think about the people that have managed me, and it's largely been, and maybe exclusively, I can think of maybe one female manager that I had. Getting to know your manager, no matter the dynamic, is very important. But I think a lot of what we've covered today are these unique opportunities for women. If we think about it on the positive side of things, there is huge opportunity perhaps to be proving oneself where there has been a void previously, and maybe females are able to stand out even more starkly in those gaps or the opportunities.
Yeah. And like Debbie mentioned before, maybe the hours with some firms could be a challenge in terms of like going out into the field, and it could be a long day. But like Debbie said, her and probably many other business owners can provide some flexibility in terms of managing your schedule based on the calls that you have or part-time or things like that. And that's where I think also that like the management side, like field service managers, owners, folks that work within field service management at APP, for example, those are much more traditional office type jobs or business type jobs where you can also have that flexibility in terms of your schedule too. You have a set amount of work that you need to get done. You need to chat with multiple service providers within our network. You need to do all this other work, but it doesn't really matter at exactly what time you do it. And you have that flexibility to schedule your day how it makes sense for you.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to hiring the best people, and that ultimately, if you trust that you're hiring the right folks and people that are aligned with the business values and are working hard for you, they're going to get the job done. So we covered, I think, a lot of interrelated threads here, and I want to be sure that if there's any other comments, Kristen and Debbie, that we didn't touch on that you'd like to put out there related to hiring, training, safety, or work-life balance, let's be sure to talk about it now. But this to me is such a critical conversation, and I know, Debbie, your experience in talking about these things and participating in groups heavily focused on increasing women in the workforce, and obviously, Kristen, through your mentorship and your career advancement at APP and SquareTrade, you've done this organically. And I think that we're having the right conversations. I think some of these things can feel like they're the same threads over and over again, but it's really, really important. And I'm so encouraged to hear some of the changes that you talked about, Debbie, even seeing more and more training opportunities popping up, vocational trade training coming back. That is going to be huge. And I think the more that female representation from all different angles, I think each of us brings a very different perspective and a different trajectory that drove us into field service management. But it really is so important. And I hope that we can continue to see these topics coming up casually or more formally, just to continue to get the word out there that there's a lot of opportunity in this space for women.
Absolutely.
Right. Anything else you want to add? Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you for your time and your participation.